So you'll have a little OK button to click.
Okay.
That's just what Zoom does, so everybody knows it's being recorded. All right.
Awesome.
So welcome back to everybody. And then we're going to progress to this point where we're going to say, I know we talked about how children grow and develop in the past, but one of the things that we're really going to focus on today is looking at the whole child. We've kind of talked about physical, spiritual will come, intellectual, but right now we're really going to kind of focus on emotional health, and that's the mental illness in families. Again, we want to remind you that it is not your job to diagnose the mental illness. And we're not even really trying to focus on either the parent or the child's mental health diagnosis either. What we're looking at is, can the parents effectively parent the children? And can the children effectively go home, or are their mental health disorders so severe that maybe they can't go home right away, which is sometimes the case. So just look, and if you notice, this may not have come up, but at the same point in time, you're aware of kind of what to look for. We always say you can recommend an assessment at any point in time. And if you think they've had a mental health assessment, but it's not doing anything, remember we have a trauma assessment, because it might be trauma. Trauma can look like mental health disorders. It can also look like behavioral orders, or it could look like a combination of the two. So especially if therapy is not working, that is one of the, and there has been trauma, that's one of the things we always suggest that you consider. All right, so we are now going to move through to poverty and neglect. And in the videos, I did say that we were going to do something with poverty or neglect. So, all right, there are going to be 3 questions for you to answer. And we'll go ahead and answer them now. And you've got to decide whether you think it's poverty or neglect. Okay. So I get to see when we're at 100% of people voted. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share the results. All right. So the first one, a family does not have a refrigerator. You said poverty. Normally I won't know who picked what. Sorry, Diana, I get to know what you picked.
I'm 100%.
You're 100%. Why did you pick poverty as opposed to neglect?
Because I thought there was probably if their refrigerator had broken or something, it wasn't working, they can have a cooler. They also have resources like at Neighbor to Neighbor. They can go every day and get meals.
Yep.
They don't have to have refrigerated food.
And this is one of the things that I often tell people, hey, look, I hang out with lawyers a little bit, so I kind of get used to seeing both sides of the spectrum. I could probably argue the case for either one. The difference is you can have shelf-stable milk. You can live without a refrigerator that is working, or one in general. It usually is a sign of poverty as opposed to neglect, as long as you're still providing foods, knowing that maybe that they have breakfast and lunch at school, so they have the milk there, and then you don't have any dairy products for what you do at night. So yes, I would agree. If push came to shove, I'm going to agree with you and say it's going to be a poverty issue, not a neglect issue. Okay. Number 2, a family lives in a rental unit with holes in the floor. And you said poverty. Now walk me through why you think poverty.
I was just thinking of like the picture that you shared with us, and all of the things wrong in the picture in my eyes. So in my eyes, yes, holes in the floor would be an issue, but I'm thinking that there are ways that they can cover it with boards or things, I don't, I guess it depends on why there's holes in the floor. I mean, if it's vermin related, that might be something else that does need to be taken care of. But
Right.
um, rotting boards and stuff like that. I'm just thinking that they don't have the money, or the landlord isn't willing to fix the holes.
Mm-hmm. And here's where we really get the first one where you could, it's going to really depend on the circumstances, whether this is a poverty issue or this is a neglect issue. We had a family at our church, and we were actually friends with them, and they could not afford to live. So they were active duty, he was active duty military, and there are places where the military are not allowed to live. Usually landlords that are slumlords and different things like that that have caused problems, and they couldn't afford to live anywhere else. They rented a trailer, and it had a huge hole in the floor. They had reported it several times. They had tracked every time they've reported it, and every time they made a note. They had proof that they've sent written notice to the landlord to fix it. They also put a board down like you suggested, and then they put a piece of furniture over the board, and they said it was really weird because it was kind of in the middle of the house, so it was a really weird place. It's not normally someplace you would have furniture, but that's what they did because they had little kids and they wanted to make sure it was safe. If that is the case, like for them, that was poverty. That was not neglect. Now, if they hadn't done anything, if they hadn't tried to report it to their landlord, if they hadn't done anything about it and they were kind of like, it's fine. They hadn't tried to prevent the children from being able to step in and hurt themselves, then we're looking at something that could potentially be neglect. So this one is one of the ones that I leave in there because it really could be argued either way, which is why I'm always going to ask, hey, why did you pick this one as opposed to that one? Okay. All right. Number 3, a family lives in a car. Walk me through your choice on this one.
I kind of chose that because I know a lot of people that this has happened to, and it could be just a temporary situation. It could be that the car is actually safer than the housing that they have access to. And again, you have access to all sorts of food that doesn't need to be refrigerated. So, and at least they have a car so that they can get the kids maybe to school or that type of thing. So,
and I think you make a good case for poverty. What I will tell you is this is a sign of poverty where it could be considered neglect. And this is one where most often the court is going to take the viewpoint that it is neglect.
okay.
The thing that they're going to look at is no running water, potentially no heat, no electricity. They wouldn't necessarily have shower capabilities. I mean, they might be in a campground, or they might be someplace where they have that opportunity. And those are things that would be considered. But that's why the court's going to lean on that neglect side as opposed to the poverty side. Now, what I will tell you is, again, coming from the experience of Rich being active duty military, we were actually considered homeless many times. And that is because you give up your quarters and your housing in one duty station, you travel to the next duty station, and sometimes you could wait 6 months, 6 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks for your next housing, or until you could go through the rent application process and put all your down payments on. And so we always knew that we would need tons of money saved up to PCS, but literally while we're on the road, and many of us would choose that time when you're in between duty station, you would tack on some of your personal vacation leave. Military just calls it leave, sick leave or vacation leave, but and you might go home. When we moved from the middle of Texas, literally, if you picture Texas in the dead center, that's where Fort Hood or whatever they're calling it now is. And then we were going to Georgia we did that by way of New England so that we could go see the families. And we were technically homeless, and Rich had like 6 weeks of leave. So we had like 7 weeks to do the journey. And so technically we were homeless for 7 weeks. and we were living in a car, but we weren't really, because we would stop at hotels or we would stop, with our family and doing that. So you really got to kind of watch the situation which is why I'm always happy when people put poverty versus neglect, and why we always want to literally look and see. Oh, launched the poll too quickly. We wanted to look and see what's the reasoning. What are we thinking? We don't want to just automatically knee jerk. Oh, they don't have electricity. That's neglect. Maybe it just got shut off and it's about to be turned back on in a couple of days, because sometimes they don't turn it right back on. Maybe they're waiting for help to pay that bill, and as soon as that comes through, they'll get it turned back on. So there can be circumstances where it could be either one. Now, what I will tell new people that come into the session that my seasoned veterans would know is they will not reintegrate a child back into the home if there's no electricity, heat, water, or into a vehicle. They'll have to be. Now, we have had a case in Dickinson County where they were living in a car. The child and the parent were living in the car, and that wasn't why they removed them. Something else happened, and then the child did have to be removed. But the parent, there was extra time given and extra grace given to try and help that parent with resources in the community to be able to get a place to live, so that then they could start the reintegration process physically, as opposed to getting all the other stuff done. So it does happen, but you cannot remove a child just because the family is poor. However, if they don't have electricity, heat, or running water, they do a lot of times consider that neglect in many, many cases. And so they will not reintegrate that child until those issues have been resolved. So, okay. Now this will probably not be as exciting to you. I think you know how to do a visit, but here's where we're going to go over visit protocols. And so one of the first thing is we talk about visiting children while they're in a placement. So this means outside of the home. This could be kinship or non-kinship. We always want you to make the appointment in advance. We want you to try and shoot for arriving on time, no more than 5 minutes early. We're not necessarily trying to inconvenience, if someone's supposed to be coming by at 6, you might be doing that last 5 minutes of pickup and cleanup, or trying to feed them supper real quick before. So we don't want to throw that schedule off too much. Remember, always take your notes, date your notes, make a list of who's there. You would have seen in the video last time that the Texas CASA advocate uses a little recorder. You could do that. I think people are I wouldn't necessarily do that in the visit though, because people tend to get really uptight about being voice recorded. It's much more confrontational than you just simply taking written notes. You're going to want to talk to both the placement and the children. And that means you're going to want to make sure you speak to each child or the children without placement present, without placement, obviously looking around and paying attention. We want the children to be completely free to speak about anything that may or may not be happening in placement, or what's going on, or they're afraid to tell you something that they would have because they don't want placement mad at them, but they really want to go home to their parents, but they don't want to make their current placement mad, and they're worried about getting in trouble. These things can happen. It's why we want to give them that opportunity. Be sure to speak with the children individually, especially if there's more than one. And then we also want to try and talk to placement without the children present, kind of let the children go play, or if they're teens, be on their electronic devices, while you can kind of just talk to them. And one of the things that I typically always ask placement, is there anything that I could recommend that the court order that would be helpful to you? Sometimes you're really surprised, and I have been surprised to hear things like, well, we're still waiting on this medication to come through, or I've been trying to get this doctor's appointment set up, but there's a problem with the funding, or there's, I've been reaching out to this person to get this question answered. And then I can help as a volunteer advocate, I can help facilitate a lot of that. And by first of all, let CASA staff know, because it might be something we can jump on right away, but at the very least, put it in your court report. And then that's the other thing. Do they have any concerns? It may seem funny, but a lot of times I ask everybody, do they have any concerns that they would like to have addressed in the court report? And where that concern section is, I literally would just put, a lot of times it says CASA advocate is concerned, but I could always put placement is concerned, da, 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 and then quote them right there. That's always a good place to put it too. And we want them to feel heard, because although we are typically with the child the most out of the professionals on the team, placement is with them more than us. So, and then make the next appointment. I don't like to leave, even if it's going to be changed, and we know things happen, that's okay. But I always like to have the next appointment set and on everybody's calendar. Okay, visit protocols for visiting with a parent if the children are in out-of-home placement, OOH, out of home. And then the sun has now dripped in. I've got this weird look over me. It'll be okay. Looks like I'm looking through a veil all of a sudden. It distracted me when I looked over. Okay. Obviously, you still want to make the appointment in advance, and a location where you are comfortable. When it comes to parents' visits, most of the time they're perfectly fine, but every once in a while we get a parent that you may feel would give a safety concern, and that's where we're like, you set it in a location where you are comfortable. I talked in the thing like public setting, but private conversation as possible. The other thing is you can always meet at the office if they're local, the CASA office or the library or other places where they're kind of quiet, but there would be other people around. Should you feel uncomfortable at any point in time, it's also okay to have a member of the CASA staff or another volunteer advocate attend with you. I know that there was a volunteer that we had in the past, and they were unsure. They just weren't. They hadn't had a good conversation with mom. Mom was very emotional and distraught the day that they first met her in court. And so they just felt more comfortable with someone going with them. And we're like, okay, no worries. See if I can try and get rid of that thing before it drives me crazy. And so I accompanied them as a staff member, and it was very easy to do. We just set it up that it was a time good for all of us. That is completely acceptable. Again, arrive on time, no more than 5 minutes early, park in a safe location. You're going to take your notes. If at any point in time you feel unsafe, we're going to say leave and then let me know. Let me know that you ended the visit early, that you felt unsafe, and then we'll talk through that and any changes that may need to be made or reports that may need to be made. Ideally, you'll make the next appointment to meet with the parents as well. Now, I didn't put it in here, but I still would ask the parents if they have any concerns. A lot of times we'll say, okay, make sure you bring that up with your attorney. And remember, with parents, we can't always answer. In fact, most of the time we can't answer their questions. We are just going to want to refer them to their attorneys. Okay, so. And then if you're visiting the parent and the children, if they've been reintegrated or they just weren't removed at all, some of the same things still apply. Making the appointment in advance, 5 minutes early, take your notes. Make sure you talk to the parents and children. This means talking to them separately and individually. And make sure you make the next appointment. Now, I have been asked, do we always have to set up an appointment with the parents in advance or with the children in advance? And what I will say is that is the courtesy. We had one volunteer before she went on to become a social worker and then move away, who was fabulous. And she had a mom And mom started to get really cagey. We realized that mom started back on substance abuse during the case. She was clean for a good part of it in the middle, and then she relapsed. And so she was trying to hide that so she would avoid or act like they weren't home when the volunteer was scheduled for a meeting. So she would just do pop-ups, and she would just, hey, I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd say hi, see how you're doing. It's not an official visit. I just thought I'd say hi, and see if we can set up a time for our next visit. And when she did, she was able to, that usually worked because she wasn't trying to go in and have an official visit, but she was able to have a brief conversation with mom while they're trying to set their calendar. She can kind of peek in the door, see what the quality of the houses look like. If the kids were there, which they weren't, but they could have potentially run up, she could have seen them. Eyes on something very simple like, hey, I have to, like, I'm supposed to eyes on the kids. Can I just see them real quick? I'm not staying for a visit. Let me just do that. You can bring them out here. Something like that, especially if you have suspicions that there's, again, like substance abuses or something's popped up. So like, I'm not going to say you never want to do one of those, but I'm going to say that they're very rare circumstances. Questions on all that so far? Okay. I'm talking fast so that you get supper and I'm gonna do laundry. I'm gonna do laundry tonight, so like my excitement for the night. All right, so we're gonna talk about the green case, and we're gonna focus on like kind of the different parts of the working a case, as well as the different parts of the court report. We'll kind of talk about certain things. Now you read, like, as I recall, it's like just a really, really brief summary of the green case. Am I correct?
Yes, and then it said to print them out, but don't look at them.
Yep, don't look at them because we're going to do that in a second.
Yes, there was a very brief something about a teacher reporting. Yep.
All right, so we'll review kind of what we have for facts. 2 weeks ago, a call was made. And what you're going to see is when you look at your case study, it may say CPS. I've just changed the language in the slides to reflect what it would be here in Kansas. So it'll say DCF. A call was made to DCF by the kindergarten teacher and the school nurse at Parkside Elementary. The callers stated that one of their students, Marky Green, often came to school with poor hygiene. Much of his clothing was not his size, and he's just come in with his third case of head lice in 3 months. And this is typically where I must stop the training at this point and be like, listen, as a mom who once had 3 children, it is really not unusual to have multiple cases of lice back. And again, because they go to school or they come in contact or one thing happens, and sometimes you just have to, you have to get stronger medicine to get rid of it. So keep that in mind. That is a normal part, although usually at this point, everybody starts scratching their heads because you mentioned not lice and that people start scratching. So I always want to stop there and just make sure people understand. In elementary school, especially, that is not an uncommon thing. Okay. I hate this sentence, but the family is Caucasian. The parents are in their late 20s. The mother has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The Green family recently moved from a few states away. So they have no extended family living nearby. A lot of these case studies, you're going to see that they abbreviate social worker as SW. Social worker found conditions in the home deplorable, but not dangerous. And so CPS, DCF for us decided to file a petition for neglect, but allow the child to remain at home for the time being. So this is highly unusual for when this case was a real case. However, with the Family First legislation that the federal government put through, this is now much more common. This is not rising to the level where they need to remove the child for a safety reason. Okay? So, as we go through this, I want you to remember, you may see that you will see at one point a conversation where they're like, well, if things don't improve, we'll remove the child from the home. That is actually not how it works anymore. But remember, these cases were written quite some time ago. All right, so now I am going to do this. I'm going to share that handout that I gave you. And that should be what you see right now. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. One of the things that you get to do is now you get to decide who you're going to talk to first. So let me give you, of course, what I left on my desk today was my list of the people. So Marky, we don't know about this person yet. Parents, school, DCF. I believe. Okay, yes. Okay. So your choices are, and Diana, you don't even have to make an agreement with anybody else. You get to actually pick who would you want to talk to first? Marky's parents, the school, so presumably the nurse and the teacher that reported it, or the DCF worker.
I would probably talk to the school first, or the very first reporting person.
Okay, so the school. All right, so go to page, it says at the bottom right corner, chapter 4, page 21. It says the nurse and Marky's teacher.
Okay.
Okay. There's questions way at the bottom of that. I don't want you to worry about those, but I just want you to go ahead and read all of that. It should be up on the screen as well, but it's a lot of times easier to read off of your own pages. So if you'll just read that and let me know when you're done.
Okay.
Okay.
But I didn't read the questions. You said not to
Nope,
read the questions.
don't worry about
right?
the questions. We're going
Okay.
to ask our own questions. So
Okay.
what's your first thoughts, first reaction to reading or to getting this information?
My first reaction is I don't know that we need to be involved in this. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it sounds like maybe there were some issues that have been brought up, but it seems like maybe they're trying to make some changes. The only thing was the vaccinations, having to get DCF involved in having the child vaccinated, but it doesn't look to me like there are awful hazardous concerns. But I mean, certainly something, and it sounds like the IEP and the teacher and the school nurse, it sounds like they've all actually been trying to keep an eye on him.
Okay. Couple of things. They're out of date with the IEP. And here's where I always warn people, I'm not going to agree with everything everybody says. One of the things that I didn't like was the fact that the nurse said that maybe he's a little slow. If he's really good at math, but he's bad at reading, that doesn't mean he's slow. So that's always one of my things. That's a trigger for me personally. I recognize that. But that sort of thing. Okay, so based on this, who are you going to want to talk to next? We have Marky, the parents, and the DCF worker, or the St. Francis worker in our case.
I would probably, let's see, I would probably want to talk to the DCF.
Okay. And then that would be page 22. So it would be the next page. And again, when you get to the questions, don't worry about the questions, but we kind of we do it a little different. So, but go ahead and read that one.
Okay.
Okay. Reactions to this.
That's more disturbing.
Okay.
Just that, yeah, it sounds like the parents, it sounds like maybe the school is compensating maybe for what the parents are lacking, especially with the food issue.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very concerning,
Yep.
very concerning. And that he said, I'm so tired, I need a break, and he's 8.
Yeah. There's definitely something going on.
Yeah,
That is not normal language for an 8-year-old,
right.
unless they're repeating something they've heard their parents say,
Right.
So, okay. Uh, where would you want to go next? So we can talk to Marky, we can talk to his parents, we can talk to the family therapist. Now, normally in real life, as you know, we don't always get to talk to the family therapist, but in this case, we actually can.
I would probably go next to the parents.
Okay. Let's go. Parents are page 20. And then I'd say go ahead and read.
Okay.
All right. And one of my typical questions, thoughts, reactions, comments.
Um, I'm glad this isn't my case. Um, yeah, I would. This is hard. This one's a hard one. Um, it would take very, and that's the one thing I don't like. So just as a CASA, just being a volunteer, I don't have the mental, I don't have any training in any of that stuff, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So not saying something to make things worse,
Mm-hmm.
but um trying to get them to understand you're just there to help. So I mean, just probably, I mean, it doesn't sound, I mean, the food, no food because it was Friday. Um, I don't know, and it sounds kind of sketchy about, I just think they need to have a very close eye. I mean, it sounds like in this that they've got him a mentor, and they've got somebody kind of coming in the home,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I think is going to be a really good idea, and not letting that slip through, because it
Yep.
sounds like maybe there isn't consistent meals, and I'm wondering if the little boy is the one. And why do they have a puppy? Why?
I know.
Why a puppy? Oh my gosh. Anyway, he's probably why he's so tired is probably maybe he's doing the cleaning and the cooking and stuff and taking care of the puppy.
I
So,
have to say that's my first thought every time I read this. Like, why did you just compound everything with a puppy of all things?
well,
Like,
it might be really good for the little boy, but I don't know. I mean, just as a comfort, but still the responsibility and knowing that they don't have food for themselves
right,
except when they go to the store on Friday,
right.
you know, how long did that food last? Does it only last till Monday, or Tuesday? So that would be my concerns also.
Right. And this is where we're going to talk to them about those kind of questions. And that's where knowing the food pantry and places where you can get meals and different things is
Right.
very important. We can start to help them out with resources, show them that we're trying to help them, not necessarily, we're not there to remove their child or anything like that. Um,
Right.
the other thing that I like to point out at this one is uh, they say that in the paragraph, you ask what happened with DCF, and Roy takes a matter of fact tone, like he's reciting. I always tell people try not to read too much into that because it could be very much up. They came over to the house and it was dirty. It was really bad, not like today. I told Judy to clean up, but she wasn't feeling great and she couldn't do it. That is very matter of fact tone, but it could be because he's tired of telling the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's trying to distance himself and not, and it could also be that he's trying not to work her up because Judy's obviously gets very upset over the prospect of losing her son,
Right.
even temporarily. And so he might be doing a matter of fact tone to just keep it very calm. Here are the facts. I'm just telling you what happened so that she doesn't get more upset, or even he doesn't get more upset.
Right.
Okay. Where would you like to go next? Marky, the family therapist, or back to DCF?
Probably Marky.
All right, so let's go to the first contact. That's going to be the very first page.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, that one's pretty straightforward. Anything that's interesting to you or?
Oh, wait. I did second contact. Oops, I read ahead. Sorry. I
That's
didn't
okay.
realize
We'll
there
go
was a first
from,
contact and a second contact. Okay, I'm gonna ignore that I read that second one. Okay. Like, okay. Yeah, that's, I mean, there wouldn't be anything there that would raise a red flag, really.
yeah, no, it, what I do see here and what I like to point out is he is a good relationship with his parents. But mom's sickness definitely has an impact.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely thinking that's what one of our underlying issues potentially could be. All right, let's
Mhm.
go ahead and say we're doing the second contact now since you just read it.
That she's in bed a lot, that would be concerning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after the second contact, we'll say we probably talked to Marky the first time when he was at school, and then we're talking to Marky now that we've seen his parents and they just got the puppy and everything.
Yeah,
Reactions or thoughts with
that one's
regard to
more concerning. I'm worried about he doesn't remember having a sister. Does that
yeah,
mean that they've had a child in DCF custody taken away?
yes. And so one of the things that I always love to let people pick their own, but typically people go back to DCF before they go to the second contact. And that's where we learn that in the other state, they did lose custody of an older sister.
Okay. Yeah,
Or
but I missed
somewhere in
that.
this. We do learn that information somewhere in here. So
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, that would be my concern. I love that he has a mentor.
mhm.
It sounds like it's a positive experience, but it sounds like we need to get mom and dad most of the help.
Mhm. Mom and
So
dad could
mom,
use a mentor.
yeah, mom, I think needs to make sure that she's on medication or whatever, and dad needs maybe some counseling, some gambling debt counseling or some type of other counseling, maybe that we
Mhm.
would be able to have to get him hooked up with.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming that's why they move a lot, is he's probably maybe losing their money, or
Right.
and that mom doesn't hit him very hard, but I mean, I I get that a little bit, but still.
Yeah. All right. Would you rather talk to the therapist or DCF next?
DCF.
Okay. So if you go to page 23, you'll see DCF caseworker second contact.
Second contact. Okay. Okay.
So there you go.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah. It's really sad if you figure this is based on a real story.
Oh, well, yeah.
So
Yeah,
every
even
one of these
worse.
case studies, with the exception of the one that Texas does that you're watching in the videos, the Harris Price case,
Yeah.
these ones that we have here they all have colors. There's the green case and the blue case and everything like that. They are all real cases from around the country that were compiled by CASA advocates. Obviously, names, places, everything's been changed to protect confidentiality, but
I don't understand the difference between the 8-month-old and him. I mean, that's they
so
would
here,
neglect the baby, but not him.
yeah, and it might be that let's see, 8 months old.
It doesn't have any details about what, and it just said he didn't seem to be neglected,
Right,
but it doesn't say how the baby seemed to be neglected.
and it could be that they weren't feeding the baby regularly. The baby might not have had the diapers changed on a regular, and he might have been. So this could have been like 3 years ago when he was at school, so he was doing okay. And this is where a lot of times I'll have the conversation. There are times they will remove one child and not the other. And then to remove the second child that maybe was left there, there would have to be another abuse. There would have to be a reason why that child was removed that was separate from the initial reason. This came into play in a Geary County case that we had where it was a sexual abuse case, actually. And they didn't realize that the daughter who was being sexually abused by her father was a twin, that she had a twin brother. And so when they removed all the children from the home, they didn't know to remove her brother. And then the parents never committed anything that could even in any way be construed as neglect or abuse, so that there was no cause or reason why the state could come in and try and remove the child. It would have been in the child's best interest to be removed from that home, because we later found out he was also sexually abused, but that had to come out much, much later, unfortunately, before they could do anything. And it was really upsetting, because as professionals, we all want to take care of everything, but they just didn't realize, and nobody, the siblings weren't talking, the parents weren't talking, nobody knew that the other child existed. Until it was too late, because the order had already been signed. And so that does happen. It is rare. If they're taking one child, they typically try to take them all, but there might be a reason why they take one and not the other. All right, let's go back just so we can finish up the case to page 16. No, I take that back. 18, the family therapist.
Okay.
And let's read that one.
Okay.
One of the best therapist reports I've ever seen. And it's not,
I mean, the therapist will take them shopping.
really. And so I think that might have been, some of the mentoring that mom needs, and different things like that. I'm gonna flip this back and we're gonna go back to the, if I can always find the right one. That's the one I'm going for. Okay. Uh, we've kind of seen the case through, we get all the information that we need. Now it's time for you to do a court report. So, you know, at this point, what are some of the things that you're going to want to recommend?
In my court report, what I would recommend is, I would recommend a continued mentor for Marky.
Mm-hmm.
With that guy, I would recommend continued therapy with Morales, Miss Morales,
Mm-hmm.
as long as she would stay involved. I would recommend possibly looking into a support group for dad,
Mm-hmm.
or
Right.
you'd probably have to get him to admit something but to get him into some kind of a support group for anonymous gambling or something, whatever he might be open to. And then maybe make sure mom is going, besides Miss Morales with therapy, make sure she's going to a medical doctor and
Mhm.
on appropriate medications.
Yep. Med management for mom for sure. Especially since we've heard from Marky that like sometimes she's keeping the house clean, she's on top of things, I think that's probably when she's in her manic session and like they're playing games and they're very interactive and they're doing all these wonderful things. And then when she gets to her manic phase, like she just can't get out of bed. There's the huge depression. There's all these different things. And that's going to have an impact. So I wonder if they've had some med management, people develop immunities to certain medicines or they have to adjust milligrams, the amount of a medicine that they're getting. And I wonder if that's been done.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to just reach out and have dad have a mental health assessment and then mention gambling because it's come up. And you don't have to say that Marky told you in the basis for that. You can just simply say it has come to CASA's attention that gambling is an issue. I think the DCF worker mentioned it too. And so different things like that, go ahead and have a mental health assessment for DAV because they could, and really one that will help with noticing addiction.
Well, and I'm wondering if in a conversation, because you might want to meet with dad and mom separately and just ask dad, hey, what are the fun after work things that you like to do? In passing like that, if, what do you enjoy doing in your pastime? Or if you didn't have to worry about anything, what would be your fun? What would you spend your time doing? And see if it would come out in something like that, where you could say, where you could approach it like, oh, okay, remember when we discussed this? And so
if money were no object, describe to me what your
yeah.
ideal day would look like.
Yeah.
No, those are great questions and great ways of handling it. So one of the things that we want to talk about now specifically is how might the mom's mental health disorder affect Marky? And I think we've kind of talked about that a little bit in his interactions. And then what might we do as a volunteer to gather additional information? I think we've talked about that too. Okay. Then in the sections on mom and dad, one of the things they always want us to do is make sure we're using both lenses, the resource lens and the deficit lens. So like, what do mom and dad still need to do versus what have they done well? And these are some of the questions like, how have they solved problems in the past? That's resource. It is also really good for them. What court ordered activities have they completed? Well, they've they've got food in the house has been cleaned, they're doing better on certain things. How are they coping? Well, they got a puppy, you know, and that's helping with discipline, and they've got this. And so there's a lot of positives that we could bring to the table. Now, they're not done. There's still more work to go. And I had one more thought. Oh, one thing I always do want to bring up, and I forgot to do it at the time, was so mom's mental health issue. One of the things to keep in mind is this, to me, is probably why Marky's homework is getting lost or not turned back in, and why he's having a hard time reading, because at that age you need to read with your children in order for them to become good readers. And if he's not getting that at home because he's too busy being the grown-up, he's not putting that time in, which would explain he probably doesn't even need an IEP as much as he just needs some special help now to get caught up on his reading skills. And I always like to point that out to people that, you know, a lot of times, yes, that IEP doesn't necessarily mean anything permanent. He might need some help now, but really reading is one of those things in elementary school kids that the parents or the caretakers absolutely have to be doing. And that's something that maybe we ask, because it looks like his mentor, his coach, maybe we ask them to also work with him on his reading and some different things at home. So, okay. So this is where I would send you into a room with another volunteer advocate, and I would have you kind of answer some of these questions and then come back and we would discuss them. But you're a veteran, and I'm not going to put you in a room by yourself. So we would.
I am in a room by myself.
Me too. But that's what we would do here is we would break out again. They would go discuss it, and then, you know, kind of bring that discussion back. We would talk specifically more about recommendations and how we would word them and different things like that. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to watch, because we're kind of doing this Harris Price case a little bit each week as we do it, to kind of have, you know, we have a lot of these short cases where we're very limited, but we get to see the rules really, really well in this Harris Price case. So we are going to watch this. And I'm going to try and experiment with it for a second. Okay.
Hello, everyone. And at this time, we're going to call cause number 67432 in the interest of the Harris Price children here in the 499th Judicial District Court of San Gabriel County, Texas. These proceedings are being recorded today pursuant to the Texas Family Code. We do have present with us here today Mr. Britton, representing the department as our county attorney. Our caseworker, Ms. Greenberg, is back with us with her supervisor, Ms. Dossett. We do have with us at this time Ms. Ott from CASA, as well as Ms. Jackson, our CASA volunteer. Ms. Duke represents the children as their attorney. She is present with us here today. We do have Ms. Langsley, who represents the mother, as her attorney, present. Ms. Sparks is here in her representation of the father, Mr. Harris. And it's nice to see we have the aunt, Ms. Hill, with us here today as well. Ladies, would you please raise your right hands then to be sworn at this time? Do each of you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony.
And again, and just a reminder, we don't swear in like this in Kansas. Typically, they only swear someone in if they're going to the stand to actually testify. But that they do things different in Texas.
Testimony that you give before this court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
All right. My understanding is that Ms. Price, the mother, was not going to be present with us here today, so I believe we have everyone here that we need. We are here today for our initial permanency review hearing. Of course, without a parent, we don't need to talk about the requirements of the court to admonish them. So we're going to go ahead and see if there are any procedural issues before we get into testimony. Anything procedural?
Your Honor, I filed in the court file this morning and given a copy to all the parties of voluntary relinquishment of parental rights of my client, Mr. Jason Harris.
And so are you requesting that the court acts on that at this time?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
All right. Have you discussed that issue with counsel or the ad litem at this time?
Yes, I have, and have made it very clear, as my client has made it clear to me, that he does not plan to participate in services or in this case in any way.
All right. I think under the circumstances, probably the best thing for us to do at this time would be to hold off on making a ruling on that relinquishment and hold it until a future hearing, just because of the determination of how things are going to go with the mother, and the child support issue would still be germane then in the future. So I think at this time, unless there's an objection, we will hold off on ruling on that relinquishment.
Okay, so when a parent voluntarily relinquishes in the state of Kansas, it cannot be done like that. It cannot just be done between your lawyer. They actually have to show up. They have to sign the paper in front of the judge or in front of a notary. That was one of the things the pandemic really threw monkey wrench in. They can voluntarily relinquish. However, it is not common, and waiting and to see, some people will voluntarily relinquish their rights because then they don't have to pay child support. That is a ploy that some parents will try when the case came out. And there's also a very feisty domestic divorce case as well, where the two parties are very contentious with each other, to use a really good legal word, but they're really feisty with each other. And so a lot of times the judges will not always allow it. First, the judge has to allow it. There has to be a legitimate reason. And then second of all, even the relinquishment, even if the judge accepts it, then DCF has to accept it. And so it does not happen all the time. So I always want to admonish people about that. And that's one of the reasons why I love this case, because I get to talk about these unusual things that sometimes you see, but many times you won't. Okay.
In my first case, I had a relinquishment.
Mm-hmm.
The 12-year-old.
Yep.
But the 3-year-old stayed. So
Yep. Which is why it's one of those crazy things, but it doesn't happen very often. We actually, we had a case in Geary that really threw everybody off completely. So we were at the temporary custody hearing, but it was only a status on the temporary custody because we were waiting on medical reports to come back, and the child had been removed for their safety. Mom had died. Dad then got custody of the child. Dad and stepmom had the child for like 6 months, and they physically, emotionally abused this child. Was a slave. It made Harry Potter look kind. Okay. And I say that because most people understand like what Harry Potter was really like as a slave and everything, but this poor little boy, and he was only, he was like 7 years old at the time. It was a horrific case. And literally the very first time Dad walked into that courtroom, he immediately wanted to relinquish his rights. And since there was not going to be a custody at any case, the abuse was severe. The judge actually ended up accepting it, but then DCF kicked it back because they're like, there hasn't even been an adjudication. There hasn't been this, there hasn't been that. Like, how could he? And there was nothing that the court could do. So we literally had the hearing and then resent the volunteer relinquishment back in again, and then they accepted it. So people want to relinquish for a variety of reasons. He was just done. He thought that would get him out of the criminal charges, but he faced many a criminal charge. Unfortunately for him, they were federal charges because everything happened while they were living on post. So it was a federal, literally federal casing. So he is going to pretty much spend the rest of his life in Leavenworth.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. It needed to be. And then they went after the stepmom too. So like it ended really well. However, that's a case where like there's no precedent for like that much of the beginning of the, like we're pretty much at the very first hearing and he relinquished. So
Yeah.
things can happen.
All right, Ms. Jackson, I think you had something you wanted to address with the court before we go any further.
Yes, Your Honor. I wanted you to know that Ben is here and would like to speak with you. He's in the hallway.
Okay, what, is he by himself out there? What's he doing out there?
He's working on his art. Ben is quite a good artist, and he's out there with his drawing sketchbook.
Okay, good. Well, maybe we can talk about that later. Since we've started with you, why don't you go ahead at this time and give us your report, please, ma'am?
Yes, Your Honor. I got permission from Ms. Price's attorney to see the results of the psychological evaluation, and it did recommend that.
Okay, so we don't need permission from any attorneys. We get access to all of that. It's just a matter of when we pull it. And then here's again, I know you know this, but where we would tell them, I would pause it probably here, talk about that, as well as the fact that typically it is not common. It's practically unheard of for a child to meet with the judge separately. Typically they can ask parents to leave and it's just the professionals that stay in the room, but they at least need to have the attorneys in there just because they need to make sure nobody's rights are being violated and different things like that. So the other thing is we have child court reports and child letters that they can write to the judge, and that's usually a better way if they want to kind of keep it confidential. So like those are the things that I would be putting in there, Diana. Just I know you know all those because I know you've experienced them, but like just so you know, this is where we would put it in.
That Ms. Price go to inpatient treatment. There is an issue with that in this area. Apparently, there are not very many beds. I think the place she would have to go would be out of town.
All right, so that's something that I know that the department is going to assist us with finding her a bed then for inpatient treatment. All right, thank you. Anything else, Ms. Jackson?
Mom has also not shown up for visits with Rose, and she has visited with Ben, but the visits have been rather chaotic. She has appeared inebriated at Aunt Carol's house and kind of overrides Carol when she tries to discipline Ben when she's there. They haven't been very successful.
All right, so this just emphasizes the requirement that we need to find her a placement in inpatient treatment as quickly as possible. And when you do visit with her, Ms. Greenberg, you need to go over again the rules of visitation and explain to her what's appropriate and what's not under the circumstances.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. What else do you want to report with the court?
I have visited with Ernie, who is the father of Robert, and he reports that Mom has called a couple of times but not been to see Robert, and when he does call, it upsets Robert. And I also wanted to bring to your attention that they put Ben on some psychotropic medication for depression and anxiety. I have concerns about that. I wish we could try some therapy and some other methods rather than putting him on those high-powered drugs.
All right. I know that we'll talk and hear from Ms. Greenberg here in a bit with regards to Ben and his therapy. It might be a good idea to go ahead then and just ask for a medication review by the department.
Absolutely,
I think
Your Honor.
that's a good suggestion, Ms. Jackson. Thank you. Anything else you want to report to the court?
I do have a good thing to report. Because of his talent in art and his relationship with his art teacher, the teacher has become sort of a mentor for Ben, and I think that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. That is a bit of good news for us to hear today.
And Robert, if I could add, Robert is doing well with his dad and his grandmother. In fact, they would be here today. However, Ernie's older brother is receiving a promotion in the military, and they're out of town to celebrate that.
Okay, good. That's good news as well. All right, thank you, ma'am. We'll go ahead then and hear from the department at this time. Ms. Greenberg, is there anything you want to highlight from your report today?
Well, only that we had a family group conference last week, Your Honor. Ms. Price attended, as well as Ben and the art teacher that Casa had referred to. Ms. Hill also, Carol Hill, the aunt, also participated. So together as a team, we discussed services and concerns and helped Ms. Price come up with a suitable and appropriate family plan of service.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Duke. Were you able to participate in that?
Yes, Your Honor. And to update the court, Ben, he wants to return to his mom's care. And one of his biggest concerns right now in his placement is that he is on some psychotropic medication. He does not want to be on them. I'm in agreement with CASA to look at a therapy angle on that instead of the medication. He does recognize that he needs help controlling his asthma. His Aunt Carol has attempted to get that prescription filled, but there's been all sorts of problems with the Medicaid card that I'm hoping the department can work with her on to get that straightened out.
All right, so Ms. Greenberg, I think that probably needs to be your very number one priority for the rest of the day. As soon as you leave here today, we need to make sure that we get that Medicaid card and those medications for the asthma resolved promptly.
Okay, I have to pause here. Wouldn't you love the judge to just order St. Francis to say, this is your number one priority. This needs to be done by the end of the day. And they'll be like,
Yeah.
yes, sir, I'll get that. Like, that would be so
Yeah.
nice.
It would.
And if there's any problem with that whatsoever, you need to make sure that if you need the assistance of the court, to contact your attorney, and he can let me know, and we'll resolve that issue promptly.
Yes,
Or Ms. Duke as well. All right, well, I think Ben wanted to visit with me. I think now might be a good time for us to go ahead and recess and do that. I'm anxious to see what he's been working on out there in the hall. Hey, Ben, I'm really glad that you got to come to court today. I understand from your CASA volunteer that you have some questions that you want to ask me. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I just wanted to let you know, talk to you about staying with my mom. I really want to go and live with my mom and see my brother Robert and stuff because I really miss him and stuff.
Right.
And so I was wondering if that was possible to do.
Right. Well, I think it's really important that you get to have visits with your brother Robert, because that's important. No matter what happens, he's always going to be your brother, and I know y'all have a great bond with each other. So that's something that we're going to try to do a better job of working where we can facilitate, so you can have some more visits with him than you're having. Now, there's a distance issue involved, and of course you're in school, and so there's a lot of things that we have to work around. But we're going to make a really big effort to make sure that we get that done for you, okay? And I know your CASA is going to help us with that, and I know that your attorney is going to help you as well. All right, so that's something we can probably for sure do better at. Now, with regards to your mom, now I know you've been working really hard and doing a good job under the circumstances that you're in. It's hard for me to know what you're going through, and also for your CASA and for your attorney, because we've never been in the situation that you're in. But I know you've been doing a good job trying to do good in school with the school changes and with your asthma and all those sorts of things. So I'm proud of you for that, and you've been doing everything that I would want you to do. Sometimes we have cases where kids do everything they're supposed to, but their parents don't always do what I ask them to do as well. And so even though you're doing everything right and making progress, you feel like I'm not rewarding you for that because I'm not letting you see your mom. But sometimes part of the problem is that parents aren't doing what they're supposed to, and we've had some problems having your mom make the progress that we want to have her make. And so we don't know for sure what the future holds, what the final outcome is going to be in the case yet. I'm happy that you're in a good place with your Aunt Carol, and we're still going to have to wait and see what happens with your mom. I know you want to live with her, and don't worry, I'll always remember that that's what your plan is. And I know your CASA and your attorney are going to remind me of that as well. But we're happy that we have you with your Aunt Carol now, and I know there's some issues and things that maybe you're not happy about there, but I feel like it's a good place for you to be right now. You want to talk about anything that's going on there with Aunt Carol?
Well, she has like all her kids, my cousins and stuff, so I feel like I'm not really needed there. And my uncle lost his job and stuff, and I feel like I'm just a burden on the family now, so I don't want to be there.
Well, I can imagine that you might really feel that way, and especially under the circumstances, but I don't feel like that's really the way that they see things. And of course, I don't interact with them every day, but I know that your aunt comes to court every time we have court, and she's really working hard to do the best for you that she can. And I think that this counseling that we're going to have between you and her may help a lot with those issues. So it looks like you've been working on something out in the hall there. I see that it says private on the front, but do you mind showing me some of it?
Sure, I guess I can show you a couple.
The Texas CASA website is a wonderful resource for looking up things like addiction and fetal alcohol symptoms and syndrome. It's something that I use probably in every case that I have. I find that.
There we go. The Texas CASA website is a good reason.
Where to start? Ben has been taking money from my purse, and it makes it worse because my husband just lost his job.
I am so sorry, Carol.
It's just been, overall, it's been hard.
So keep in mind, this is the guardian ad litem. They are supposed to go and visit with all their children. It doesn't always happen, but it's supposed to happen.
Lately, he's been talking back to me, not to mention the medication that I've been trying to get. His asthma medicine, I'm having the hardest time getting any help to help him. And that's so frustrating. It shouldn't take this long to do. And okay, so then to top it off, every time Kathy comes over to visit, it's like a nightmare. I mean, she's like, I think she's drunk. And then,
Hey, Ben, what's going on?
Can't believe you, Aunt Carol. Talk about your own family like that.
Ben, come on. You know it's not like that.
Let's go. Can we go now?
I'll talk to you later, Lori.
Okay, thanks,
Bye.
Carol. Tell me how you feel about living with your Aunt Carol.
I mean, she gets annoying sometimes, but I do like her and her husband. I just don't feel like they really want me there. Like I'm a burden on their family.
Okay,
I want to live with my mom.
if you can't live with your mom, is your second choice to be with Aunt Carol?
I want to be with my brother, and that's another thing. I mean, I know we're going to play basketball right now, but it's not enough.
Yeah, you're not seeing very much of him. I'm worried that what's going to end up happening is, first of all, she said you were stealing. If that's going on, what I worry is that the placement's going to break down. That Aunt Carol is not going to be able to keep you. And then what we're looking at realistically is either a foster home, if your behaviors are okay, or we're looking at a residential treatment center. And both of those places are likely to be far outside.
Okay, they wouldn't go to a residential treatment facility anymore. They would go to a group home for teens.
And far away from your mom, your brother, your sister, your aunt. Is that what you want?
No.
So Ben, I'm going to need to talk to Casa about what's going on at Carol's house. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Hey,
Okay.
Ben,
Can I go now?
Yeah, that's fine.
what's up with him?
It's good to see you, man.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
It's going? How's Aunt Carol's?
It's getting kind of annoying there. I just really want to go stay with my mom again.
I know. I'm sorry, man, but right now you can't do that, and it's really important that you're around people who love you, and your Aunt Carol loves you, and she's there for you. So it's really good to be around family.
Have you talked to Carol lately?
Not in a couple of days.
Well, I just took him from Carol's house, and she told me that Ben has been stealing from them. She also told me that her husband lost his job, so obviously the stealing is even more troubling because now finances are really stretched.
Just keep your head up and just stay out of trouble, and you'll do that. How's school going?
It's going all right. I mean,
It's going all right.
I like the art class again.
Okay, good. Like you're doing your drawing again.
Yeah,
Good,
sketching and
good.
stuff.
All right. What about girls?
Yeah.
I'm just
Let's play
saying, my
basketball.
man.
Let's play basketball.
Okay. All right. What about girls? You got one.
Yeah, I got one.
All right. I got you. Good. All right.
Oh, no. Is this something that the judge needs to know?
I have a feeling it's going to come out. Obviously, you're going to decide what's in the court report, your court report. But I am concerned. We talked about how he wants to stay in Carol's home. He likes being with his cousins. If he doesn't make it work there, then, we're looking at a foster home or residential treatment center or something like that.
What's Carol's attitude?
Really disappointed and upset and mad.
We aren't close to having to move him, are we?
She hasn't told me that she's asking for him to leave, but I sense that she's really struggling.
Oh, dear. Well, thanks for telling me. I appreciate that. I appreciate you bringing him out today.
Oh, you're
but
welcome.
that's not very good news.
No, it's not good news.
It's like, right here. You don't even know what's gonna happen. You don't even know.
Oh!
See, that's what happens. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh no.
See?
Double time.
I see.
Third time's a charm.
Okay. So it's like our own soap opera right here. Normally, again, I would have like a group of you work together on some recommendations that you would make for the next court report, different things like that. And then ask, like, would you include the theft in your report? You know, do you think placement will disrupt? Why or why not? Would you, go ahead.
I mean, why do they think it was him? There's lots of other kids in the house. So, I mean, was he caught with it? Did he admit to it? It didn't sound like, I mean, she said something about it and he didn't deny it. So,
Right.
I mean, if that is true, yes, I would probably put it in my CASA report. And I mean, yeah, you would hope that I think with the guardian ad litem telling him, hey, here's your other options.
Yeah.
You know, your other option isn't going home to mom. Your other option is, you know,
Right.
And so I think that probably hopefully woke him up a little bit and so hopefully
Yeah.
that behavior would stop and then he could, you know, and maybe talk to him about, he keeps saying he's a burden. Maybe talk to placement about giving him specific chores that only he does so that he feels like he's contributing something to the family.
That's a great idea and a great recommendation to include as well. Would you include a concern about a possible disruption in your court report?
Probably not.
Yeah. I might, if I read the situation, I don't think at this point I would, but if it continued to get worse, I think I might just say that there are some issues going on and, you know, we just want to make sure we can stabilize placement. I mean, that sounds like, I don't know, a case
Well,
that
like I said, I think with the guardian ad litem saying, here's your other options.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that with that, the behavior straightens up. I mean, I would sure put in the report that the aunt was very upset that this behavior was happening.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, but hopefully that wake up call of here's what your other options are, dude, would be enough to maybe straighten them out.
So here's the other piece of the puzzle that I want to talk about with this. Excuse me, long day. The step siblings, they have different dads. But Ben and Robert are really close. And when in the state wherever this case happened, it could have happened even in Kansas. I don't know that it did, but it could have. A few years ago, there's no way that those two boys could be placed together because they had separate fathers. However, in the state of Kansas, 2017, a law was passed that allows step siblings to be together. Now, there are certain circumstances. However, if Robert's dad and grandma were willing, they could potentially be placement for Ben. Now, I have to say that now that you know that, I, as an advocate on this particular case, would probably have advocated to at least keep the two boys together from the beginning, rather than place Ben with the aunt.
Yeah.
Now, there might have been
about that, whether the dad would be open to taking him, but
he's obviously projecting a paternal role here. He cares about him. He cares about the brother. You know, this might not be a bad solution. And even if they felt like he couldn't do it then, but now things have settled, they could still, rather than move Ben into a foster home or a group home, excuse me, I would be advocating, hey, could we at least explore the possibility of
Yeah.
him going into the same home as Robert?
Yeah.
He is already a parent to his two younger siblings, as we've seen in the previous videos. Having him in that role where he could potentially help with Robert is going to make him seem like he's not a burden, that like he's just taking care of his brother. I just wonder if that might not be a better placement, even at the beginning, than here.
Right.
But I wanted everybody to get here before we talk about it, and which is why I like these videos, is at this point we can talk about this and look at it and see the relationship between Robert's dad, Robert, and Ben, and it really makes sense, especially when you're looking at what's going on in the aunt's house. So
Mm-hmm.
in Kansas, that would be an acceptable kinship placement for the child. So, alrighty then. Questions for us? Do you have any questions? Anything you've gone over in the last week or anything like that? Okay.
No.
Well, I will send out tomorrow the next link to the jot form.
Okay.
I finished it yesterday. I proofed it today and tweaked it a bit. And so that will go out first thing tomorrow. And then I will see you next Tuesday.
Awesome.
All right. All right. Well,
Thank
we will see
you.
you later. I'm going to actually stop here for a second and say